Welcome to episode 3 of our 7-part series in breaking down the sales process. Today, we're going to be discussing problem awareness and solution awareness. My name is Dana Neeson. I run a telesales team for Tailored Legacy across 17 states. We sell final expense insurance exclusively over the phone, and my job is to help you have more elevated and stronger sales conversations. So we've gone over discovery in detail. We've gone over education in detail. If you are finding this episode before you've watched the other two, you should stop here and go back. Episode 3, we are covering a very, very important topic, which is problem awareness and then solution awareness. It's kind of putting those both in the same process. And what we're doing in this part of the sales conversation, right? It's not a presentation, it's a conversation. Is we are about to educate people on problems that they did not know they had prior to getting on the phone with you. You're going to help them identify that it is in fact a problem. And so you have the opportunity to come in now and help solve that problem for them. Now, the thing about problem awareness when it comes to my script and my team is it is going to be very, very specific to an agent that sells a Lincoln Heritage life insurance policy, because we specifically talk about the Funeral Consumer Guardian Society and how we will be there to help grieving families when they pass. So before I recorded this video, I wanted to take a minute and think about, if I weren't with Lincoln Heritage, because I know a lot of people who are watching this right now are not. If I weren't with Lincoln Heritage, could I still have an additional problem awareness paragraph in my script so that I can provide additional value to my customers, because I don't have the FCGS to fall back on? Here's what I came up with. After we go into discovery, after we go into education on term versus whole life, we are going to take the sale away. This is how I ended education. We're going to say, now you can get a whole life policy anywhere, right? But here's kind of why I want to encourage you to move forward with a policy with us, and why a lot of people choose to get one with us. I'm going to swing back to the Guardian Society and Lincoln Heritage in the second part of this. I am going to focus right now on the people that are not with Lincoln Heritage and kind of my thought process of what I would do if I were you. First, I would educate myself on the funeral industry. I would educate myself on the claims process for every single one of the carrier that you're with. So if you're with 10 carriers, you better be calling that claims department today. And I want you to talk to someone in claims, and I want you to have them tell you in detail exactly what they require in order to file a claim, and then get how long it takes typically for those claims to pay out. And any other pieces of information that you can get. Because the first part of problem awareness is I want you to educate your clients on how long it can take for life insurance policies to pay out. And I know a lot of your scripts say that your companies will pay out within 24 to 48 hours, but the reality is that is not true. And once you call the claims department and you hear it for yourself, because be honest, how many of you watching this right now have actually taken the time to actually research the process yourself? Or are you just relying on the upline and the script that you have in front of you to regurgitate that information to your customer? Be honest with yourself. Once you do that, you have all the information in front of you. You're going to start by telling your customer, now, were you aware that it typically takes most insurance companies somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks to pay out? And by law, it can actually take up to 6 months. Did you know that? And majority of families who are getting this to pay for their funeral expenses, your loved ones just aren't going to have that kind of time. It can take a week or two just for the funeral home to provide your family the death certificate they need to file the claim, which is something that nobody can control. And in the meantime, the funeral homes a lot of time need to get paid. That's kind of an issue. It's like a catch-22. you need to pay the funeral home at least 50%, sometimes 100% for the cost of your final expenses, but yet you can't even file the claim for the life insurance until the funeral home gives you the death certificate. But they won't do the work to get the death certificate until you've paid them. So it's like this big conundrum that's happening in the industry. So what you have the opportunity to do, since you don't have the FCGS to rely on, is you should come up with a research guide, a claims process guide for the carrier that you're signing up your customer through, and say, because you're working with me, and because I know how sensitive this topic can be, and I'm not just here to sell you a policy, I want to make sure that your family knows exactly what to do so they can get that money in their hands as soon as humanly possible. I am going to include a guide for you that goes over step by step exactly what you need to do for what your family needs to do in order to get that money in their hands right away. And you're not going to get that from, any other life insurance company. And this guide will probably shave off weeks of time because they're going to be prepared and they're going to be organized. And sometimes this stuff can be done, almost in advance of your actual passing if they know that it's coming. Would it be helpful for you and your family? Excuse me. If I had a ready-to-go guide that I could send to you with your policy to help make things a lot easier for them when the time comes. Okay, that's what I would do. Now, the second thing that I would do is, once I've created a problem and then solved that problem, I would then talk about, now, in addition to making sure your family gets paid out right away, I also want to talk to you about something that a lot of people kind of don't discuss when they're buying this final expense insurance. And it's what kind of goes on in the funeral industry. And unfortunately, in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of these family-run funeral homes were getting gobbled up and bought up by these massive corporations, but keeping the integrity of the family name on the sign because they didn't want people to think it was a big corporation. Well, what ended up happening is that once they were bought by these corporations, the prices of cremations, the prices of funerals, they skyrocketed. They went up 300, 500% because it was all about making a profit. Like, were you aware that that has been happening? Do you know anyone that has maybe overpaid for a funeral, or, kind of probe and get some information from them? A lot of times you'll be dealing with people that have experiences with a funeral and how much they had to pay. You should have an idea of how much it typically costs for a cremation. You should have an idea of how much it typically costs for a burial. And what I would do if I were you is I would research and call 3 to 4 funeral homes in your customer's area, and provide their family with a predetermined price analysis that could give them information on the best cost for where they live. In addition, I would provide an information guide that talks about how much caskets should cost, information on outer burial containers, information on headstones, engraving, florists. And I would be the person to educate my customers on the dangers of the funeral industry and an advanced guide of what to look out for, and even resources on buying caskets on your own. You can get caskets at Costco. You can get caskets on Walmart. You can get caskets on Amazon. You do not have to get them directly through the funeral home. And it is illegal to charge the families a receiving fee. So you can have a casket shipped, next day air for probably a quarter of the cost that they'll charge you directly at the funeral home. And I think that if you position yourself as an authority, as I'm not just here to sell you a policy, but I'm also here to educate you. So that way you and your family can try to make some of these arrangements in advance. Because when the time comes, when you die, that is not the time to start making arrangements and start thinking about pricing, because what's going to happen, and now you're going to paint the picture of, the funeral director, the first question they're going to ask is, how do you plan on paying? And did your loved one have insurance? They're going to try to get that insurance policy in their hands so they can flip that page and see how much it's worth. And now they know how much they can spend. And so in addition to leaving your family a lump sum to ease the burden, we want to do everything we can to make sure that anything you can do now while you're here to save money from that policy stays with your family. So by signing up with me, not only are you going to get a policy, but you're going to get a guide on educating your family on the claims process with whatever carrier you put them with that you're going to create in advance. And two, it's going to be a whole research guide on what to look for cremation, price shopping, funeral homes in the area, as well as researching the cost of burials in their area and providing them a guide on what they should be looking for and where they could possibly purchase other items from. And maybe they don't need the most expensive outer burial container. Maybe they don't, there's so many things that go into it. And I just took about 24 hours to think about, if I don't have the FCGS, I'm just an independent agent. What can I do to elevate myself as the expert, as the authority, to not only just rely on the fact that I have a cheap policy? Okay, so this should be creating huge light bulbs in your head. If you are not already doing this, you should be, because this will help create more value in yourself. It will probably help keep more policies on the books for you, because not only are you offering it at a great price, but now you're also going one step further and creating professional guides with your face. I would have a picture of myself on it. I would have my contact information on it. And I would spend the money to have a bunch of these guides for the claims process, as well as, a Q&A and what to look for the final arrangements, final expenses. That is what I would do. You come in and solve those problems for them. You elevate yourself as the expert. For my Lincoln Heritage agents, it's pretty clear that the Funeral Consumer Guardian Society offers the highest level advocacy support for our beneficiaries than anything I've ever seen. The work that they do, how available they are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to assist families at their time of need, puts them in a position where they don't have to do all of that thinking in advance. They don't have to do these arrangements in advance. All they have to do is pull out their ID card, make one phone call to them, and they will literally be there to take care of everything for the family, as their family approves, everything that they provide them, from the price shopping and possibly even purchasing things from a third party. So how I approach problem awareness for a Lincoln agent is very similar to kind of how I makeshifted it for my independent brokers. So I would still start the same as far as discussing how long it typically takes for insurance companies to pay out, and making sure that they identify with the fact that there is in fact a problem with that, and where would that leave your family if it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get paid. And once we've acknowledged that, then I come in and say, how we solve that, how the Funeral Guardian Society can take assignment of the policy. They can pay in advance of even receiving the death certificate. And, they've even paid claims in under an hour before. When that funeral home needs to be paid, they make sure they handle that payment immediately. And when the death certificate is received, then Lincoln will pay the remaining benefit to the family if there's anything left to be paid. So that's how we wrap up the first problem awareness, solution awareness. Do you like the idea of that? And kind of probe, make sure they're participating in the conversation. And then we move on to discussing how the funeral industry is unregulated, and how, the corporations took over in the 80s and 90s, and how the Guardian Society was founded by an ex-funeral director. We have a whole story that I teach my team on how we talk about how the Guardian Society was created and founded, and how we send them a final wishes guide with their policy. So all they have to do is complete their final wishes, send it back to us. We store those details with your policy information. You will hand out ID cards to your beneficiaries, to your loved ones. And so when that time comes, all they have to do is pull out that ID card, make one phone call, and we have your final wishes and we can take over from there. Okay, so that's the 2 problems that I identify with families that they did not know they had before they got on the phone with us. You cannot present these problems and solutions in advance of talking about the education in term versus whole life, because that is just positioning yourself as the expert, as the authority, not going too deep into the emotional stuff yet. So that allows a smooth transition into more education in the form of problem awareness, solving those problems. And when we wrap that up, we end it with a story. We do put it all together for them, and I will save storytelling for video number 4. Hope you enjoyed number 3 of our sales series in breaking down the final expense sales process, and I'll see you next time.